I'm just going to take this week's episode to talk about Indiana and Ohio State and this hypothetical matchup of them meeting in the Big Ten championship game, which is looking more likely than not at this point. I think these are the two best teams in the country, clearly by far. I know A&M is undefeated, and we can talk about them on another episode if need be, but these are the two best teams in the country. So let's start with Indiana. Very well coached, very disciplined, great on both sides of the football. Defensively, they're shutting teams down, they're getting a lot of stops, and they're coming up with turnovers. Yes, they don't have the high-powered, high-profile names like Ohio State does with Caleb Downs, Arvell Reese, and those guys, but Indiana is doing great things defensively. And just look at the game against Oregon on the road at Autzen. Indiana's defense just absolutely stifling and not allowing Dante Moore and Oregon's offense to do anything in that second half of that game was extremely, extremely impressive. Offensively for Indiana, obviously Fernando Mendoza, Heisman candidate, could be a favorite for the Heisman if, depending on what board you're looking at. It's basically a two-man race, I think, right now between him and Julian Sayin. So we know the passing attack is great. They have weapons on the outside of receiver. We know that. I think what's more impressive, or just as impressive with Indiana's offense, is their rushing game. They're running the ball for 230 yards per game on average, and that's putting them in the top 10, top 15 in the country. So they are very, very well balanced right now on offense, and they have a great defense. They're well coached, they're disciplined, and they're just destroying teams back-to-back 50 points against UCLA, and then I'm forgetting who they played today, Maryland. So this is not to be overlooked with what Indiana is doing right now. They also have the best win in the country going on the road and beating Oregon at Autzen Stadium, and that's better than any win Ohio State has, and that's coming from me, an Ohio State fan. And for the SEC fanboys and the SEC people that like to say, well, let's see them play in the SEC schedule. Let's see them play Alabama's schedule of, the 4 ranked teams in a row or whatever it was. My response to that is, okay, cool. Let's see any SEC team go on the road at Autzen and beat Oregon and completely stifle Oregon's offense in the second half. And then Oregon was in that game because they got a pick 6, right? So, and that's still a 10-point win for Indiana. I want to see Alabama do that. They wouldn't. I want to see Georgia do that. They wouldn't. Georgia's barely scraping by these teams right now. So there is no top dog of the SEC that's scary. Again, Texas A&M, I get it. They're undefeated. They're the best SEC team right now. But clearly, Indiana and Ohio State, I think, are in a small tier by themselves right now. And let's switch over to the other side and talk Ohio State. So Ohio State this year doesn't have a signature win that is as impressive as Indiana going on the road at Oregon, but Ohio State is just cruising through games and cruising through their schedule right now. They are being very intentional with low pace of play, lessening the amount of plays that they have, and the whole point of that is, they're towards the bottom of the country at only about 62 plays per game. I think that puts them around 120th in the country, and that's intentional because if you total up how many plays they're saving by their slow pace of play, they're essentially playing one less game in terms of game reps. So they're trying to keep themselves fresh to go on a stretch playoff run and play like they did down the stretch last year. Ohio State on offense, obviously very lethal, very aggressive when they're pushing the ball downfield. There's no team better in the country, I think, in the pass game right now, pushing the ball downfield than Julian Sayin, and then their 2 wide receiver ones with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Brandon Inniss, is starting to get a little bit better with his production, but the 3-headed monster in the passing attack with Sayin, Tate, and Smith, no other team can match that, and I don't think anyone can stop that. You take away Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate's going to eat, and vice versa. The weakness for Ohio State is the offensive line has really kind of been hit and miss and kind of rocky lately, especially in the running game. And part of that goes hand in hand is Ohio State doesn't really know who their best running back is. And I should actually say, I think they know Bo Jackson, a true freshman, is their best running back. And Isaiah West, another true freshman, might be RB2. But right now they have this 4-headed monster at running back in the backfield. And they're just trying to figure out the best way to use these guys. Obviously, losing Travion Henderson, Quinshawn Judkins to the NFL draft last year, that hurts, and it's hard to replace that. But C.J. Donaldson, the West Virginia transfer, hasn't been great, doesn't do a lot of things really well, and had a fumble today, which set Penn State up for their second score. James Peoples hasn't really looked that good, and then you have the 2 true freshmen. So Indiana is much, much better at running the football than Ohio State is. Ohio State defensively, obviously there's a lot to like. Arvell Reese going to be a first-round pick. Caleb Downs going to be a first-round pick. Arvell is going to go in the top 10. Caleb might even as well. NFL guys all over that side of the roster for Ohio State. So in this hypothetical Big Ten championship matchup, I think the most interesting chess match within, the game within the game would be the Indiana rushing attack versus the Ohio State defense, specifically the Ohio State rush defense. Ohio State's linebackers, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese. I mean, as good as that defense is at all three levels, those linebackers might be the best unit of that defense. It's hard to say who's the best because everyone is so good, but Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles are playing at a very, very high level right now. With that being said, Ohio State's defense does give up a little bit of stuff here and there, and you saw Kaytron Allen and Penn State find some success on the ground game. Now, Ohio State, was able to shut it down in the second half and looked awesome, but with Indiana's rushing attack, first of all, Indiana's offense being so balanced and having to respect the run and the pass, and then the rushing attack, they're running for 230 yards per game, and they have multiple guys back there in their backfield. That's going to be a true test going up against this Ohio State defense, but also for this Ohio State defense to shut them down. I think Ohio State and Matt Patricia would have to shut down the rushing attack and try to force Indiana's offense to be one-dimensional. This is going to be a monster of a Big Ten championship game, especially if we're getting both these teams 12-0, 12-0. I think it's looking pretty likely right now. Ohio State at Michigan, we'll have to see how that plays out before we get ahead of ourselves. But undoubtedly, if it's 12-0, 12-0, the winner of that game is not only the one seed in the playoff, but also the winning quarterback, I would bet, is going to win the Heisman Trophy. Now, the loser of that game, you're fine. You're still in the playoff. Hell, you might even be the 3 seed. So for us as college football fans, that's just going to be a great, great game to watch if we get that. Now it's November. It's November 1st when I'm recording this. I really hope we get this monster of a matchup with undefeated Indiana, undefeated Ohio State. These are the two best teams in the country, and it would just be, I think, one of the best games in college football this season if we're able to get it.